Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Bookum Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley, and this is a special episode of Founders Talk Podcast, a podcast for founders to tell their stories, ideas, and visions of the future. This episode is brought to you by Bookum, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookumapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the brilliant DJ Johnson. DJ is the owner and founder of Baldwin Co, a bookstore based in New Orleans. He is a leader, he's intentional, he's informative, he's community driven, and he's a compelling speaker. He has found a way and he has made a way. DJ, welcome to the Founders Talk podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. It is my pleasure. I am equally as much of a fan of you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a privilege to talk to you and just kind of pick your brain about things and talk to you about it from your founders. So I would love to start with, I heard that the bookstore originally was a pool boy shop. I want to ask, like, what was your favorite pool boy in the city, or what's your favorite place to eat in New Orleans? I kind of want to start with the cuisine and culture of New Orleans.
As a slight correction, so the actual bookstore was actually a daiquiri shop, but it's owned by the same owners, the same family that owned the pool boy shop. So it was called Curbside Daiquiri, and that's where the bookstore resides. But the building, which is across the parking lot, that housed the famous jeans po' boys, the world famous jeans po' boys. You may have seen it in Drake's video and Lil Wayne's video. You've seen it in a lot of the hip hop videos. It's one of the most iconic buildings in the city. That I also own that. I own that building. So I purchased these collection of buildings. It's a corner of a city block. So it's four properties in total. So I purchased that. So a lot of people do think that this was actually the po' boy shop, but it's actually a curbside daiquiri that you would walk over to Jean's po' boy and you would order your po' boy. It might be a roast beef, fully dressed po' boy. And then while you're waiting on that order, then you walk over to the daiquiri shop and you get your daiquiri. And there's photos. I actually have photos of like Jay-Z and Beyonce walking out of the daiquiri shop. It just was one of their favorite spots to visit. So for me, my po' boy at the time was probably at the time when I was eating jeans, it probably was the roast beef. Like, man, you pick up that roast beef sandwich and the juice is dripping down your forearm. I don't eat like that anymore, but at the time, it was like the spot to go to when you left the club. You leave the club at like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, because you were talking about you changed up your eating habit, and you said there's a certain book that pulled that out of you too. Like, what kind of got you into switching up? What was the book called again?
And it was Satan, I'm Taking Back My Health by Chawanda Kunjufa. Life-changing.
Okay.
I read the book and immediately, not the day after, not 2 days after, not a week later, not a month later, not this is my New Year's resolution. The day after I read that book, I changed my eating habits.
Wow.
It's that powerful. Chawanda Kunjufa is a bona fide genius. He's not read enough, especially in today's society where we're talking about the lost identity of our young boys. You know, there's a lot of discussion about young boys being lost today, but what we don't understand is that there's a conspiracy to destroy our young Black boys. Chawanda Kunjufa has been identifying this conspiracy and how white supremacy has been implementing this strategy for decades. And one of the things that he also talks about in the destruction of the Black community is through our foods and how our eating habits, how they erode our health, increase our high blood pressure, lower our cognitive abilities, because of course, when we're suffering from health ailments, it doesn't produce high quality brain functions. So he's like, hey, look, if you want to be a critical thinker, if you want to be a better banker, you want to be a better doctor, you want to be a better physician, you want to be a better engineer, one of the things you have to do is you have to give your body the correct fuel. You know, I don't know what kind of vehicle you have, but you can't have a high performance vehicle. You're not putting 87 in a high performance vehicle. You're putting 93 in it.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna add on to that. There's this football player, Von Miller. He was like, he got sick one day. He's like, I can't. I guess he had eight. It must have been mozzarella sticks. Like, I can't put what's like 85 in a 93 Ferrari. I gotta make sure my tempo is good. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that Jawanza Kunjufa does, he breaks down the science of the foods. One of the things that he does best. So I remember at the time I had read How to Eat to Live by Elijah Muhammad. I had read volume 1 and volume 2 prior to reading Satan, I'm Taking Back My Health. And while I love what Elijah Muhammad did, he didn't go depth into the science of foods and the study of how they impact our bodies. And he also didn't offer many alternatives. So I was like, oh, all right, thanks, Elijah. I appreciate you. It wasn't necessarily life changing. I read Jawanza's book and I was like, Satan is really trying to destroy us. I was like, oh, but he also gives you alternatives. He's like, don't eat this, eat this. Because when you eat pork, it takes 14 to 16 days to digest in the body. Take a piece of pork, put it on the countertop, come back 14 to 16 days and see the level of erosion and calcification and toxins that it's producing. That's what it's doing in your body. Take beef and it takes 12 to 14 days, chicken 10 to 12 days, fish within a matter of 2 to 4 days for fish and vegetables and fruits a matter of hours, just showing like how you clear out your digestive tract and how your body produces and breaks down the foods. So I read that book and man, I'm one of those individuals to where if I read a compelling argument, then, I'll change right then and there.
No, see, and that's what it's about. And recently had Les Alfred on. She has a podcast called Balanced Black Girl. And when she was just talking, I started looking up some of the statistics about just when it comes to health and fitness and all these things. And it's just so important that we have these conversations, that you see people that you admire that take their health serious. We are talking to his name is Alfred Edmonds. He worked with Black Enterprise Jr. And he talked about Reginald Lewis. And he said, imagine how much more wealth creation he could have had if he didn't die at such a young age. And I think there's a lot of people that come from Black and brown communities that have that chance to build wealth in this generation and help each other if we continue to stay healthy and stay fit.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm speaking of that, and speaking of, from the physical side, from the reading side, I know you grew up in a family that often was reading a lot. What were some of those books and heroes that inspired you? As well as I know your siblings gravitated to different authors, where you might have gravitated to James Baldwin, who I really want to get into today. Who were those authors your siblings were gravitating to?
Well, I have one sibling gravitated toward W.B. Du Bois. Naturally, his middle name is Du Bois, so he's named after W.B. Du Bois. My older brother gravitated toward Langston Hughes and toward Malcolm X. He was actually the person who introduced me to Malcolm X, because I wanted to do everything my older brother wanted to do. And then I have another brother who he gravitated more toward philosophical thought, like Eastern European philosophical thought. Just in more so in his adult life. As an adolescent, he read the books that we read, and I want to say, but he was an artist, so he could look at you, take a photo image in his mind, and he can draw you just like that, and it'll be a spitting image of you. But now today, he's much more of a philosophical reader, like Marcus Aurelius, and he loves reading those type of philosophical books. As a Man Thinketh, those type books.
Okay.
But for me, I gravitated more toward James Baldwin. My dad, both my parents are avid readers. And my dad used to tell us that you're going to read about white folks all day in school, but in this house, you're going to read about Black people. So we couldn't read books by white people. So we had to read books by Zora Neale Hurston, Toni Morrison, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, Autobiography of Malcolm X, Langston Hughes, Alice Walker. These were the books. These were the only books we had in the house. And he also had a rule on Monday, you couldn't watch TV and you couldn't go outside. So you had to read. So I remember on Mondays, which is probably the reason why I have such a disdain for Mondays today. But on Mondays, we couldn't do anything. We'd get home from school and you just had to sit around the living room. You're just looking at everybody, just reading, but I love that he did that for us because it made me the person I am today. But that was our Monday. Every single Monday, we had to sit around as a family in the living room. There's no TV, there's no music, there's no going playing outside. You can play outside Sunday, you can play outside Tuesday.
Wow.
But on Mondays, we had to read, and we couldn't read about white folks. So I remember when we started going to the movies, I love my dad, he's amazing. So if we wanted to see a movie and it wasn't starring a Black person, they were like, you can't watch that movie. We don't watch movies starring white people. So, and my mom is the same. She's just as militant. I won't even say militant. I hate to necessarily use that word when it comes to Black empowerment, but she just wanted to empower us with our sense of self. So my mom was as much of an advocate for us celebrating our Black excellence in culture. So man, that was the household I grew up to, and I just kind of gravitated toward Jimmy. And I think part of the reason why I gravitated toward it is because I think I struggled with my perception of the church and my identity with the church. I grew up in a Baptist family, very, very strong Baptist family, to whereas my grandma was like, you getting up and you going to church. And I think I was a very inquisitive kid. It's very, very inquisitive. I was the kid to whereas my parents would tell you I ask why on everything, which my son does to me now. And it's funny. But he's 3 and everything is why. Everything is 5 whys. It's not 1 why, it's 5 whys. He got to get down to the bottom of it. But so I remember, I was never the kid to where you can say, do this just because I said so. Every time that happened, I got a whipping because it never set well with me. So, you got to think, I think when I first read the autobiography of Malcolm X, I think I might have been like 9 years old. So like the type of content I'm reading, and Dick Gregory and H. Rap Brown. So we're reading that. So my mind is processing information pretty quickly. And when you read Dick Gregory, you're just like, okay, I'm about to challenge everything. So I think in seeing how James Baldwin wrestled with this idea of Christianity, I wrestled with it also. And then after that, I fell in love with Carter G. Woodson and the Miseducation of Negro. I think I probably read that book at least 20 times, at least 20 times. And I got to be honest with you, part of my affinity for it is not that he takes a really deep dive into the miseducation of the Negro, but his criticisms of the Black church and how it has led to a lot of our sustainable subjugation amongst ourselves.
Interesting. So how do you engage with the Black church now, or how do you think about that? He said not at all. There's some things, it just kind of stays and you continue to wrestle with it. That's interesting. Yeah. But even that culture you grew up in reading and that intellectual sparring that comes with that, because I know now you are not only questioning what you're reading in school, but you're going at it with your siblings, because now you're saying, okay, well, Baldwin had it said it like this, but Du Bois said it in this way, and it's that intellectual sparring that I know that had to take place in the household. So how was those relationships as you all kind of got older? Like how did you all continue to intellectually challenge each other?
We didn't so much have these philosophical debates when we were in middle school and high school. We were big sports. We all played sports.
Okay.
We were good in sports. So we would take the time to read, but we wouldn't necessarily discuss. We didn't necessarily have dialogue on it. Not within the household. And the other part is, we're just so distracted as kids. I don't know if we could understand everything that we were reading it wasn't until probably my collegiate days where we really started engaging in critical dialogue around these different philosophies and ideas. I had a brother, he was graduating from Southern University. Another brother out in LA was in college, and I was at Clark Atlanta. I think I might have been in my grad program or going into my grad program at Georgia State. And then my other brother was at Morehouse. And I think it was at that moment where we're all kind of like either exiting college or entering college. So as we started having these discussions about these different Black philosophical thoughts. But it was fun. It was fun. You know, it's intellectual sparring, iron sharpen iron.
Yep.
It was really fun. I mean, we get into conversations about. I remember we got into one conversation about the Nation of Islam and that age-old debate on who was responsible for Malcolm's death. And it was a very, very interesting and heated conversation. My brother and I, we're huge Malcolm X fans, huge Malcolm X fans. But at the time, I think I was arguing from the perspective of Elijah Muhammad's, and he was arguing from perspective of Malcolm X. And it just was an interesting conversation. I remember another year we were arguing about Malala Kalinga and talking about celebrating Kwanzaa and what that meant to the Black community, and was it important, was it necessary, and should it become more widestream, mainstream? It was interesting. We had a lot of great discussions regarding just philosophical thought within our household, and it was good because we were all avid readers.
Yeah. And how does that kind of play into Baldwin and Co now? Is it the same type of intellectual sparring there, or how do you kind of think about that as the third place for these type of conversations?
For Baldwin and Company, one of the things that I wanted to create here at Baldwin and Company was a place for community building, to provide a neutral ground where people can, from diverse backgrounds, can just come together and interact and form social bonds. I am an advocate for interpersonal communication. I love interpersonal communication. I'm not great on the phone. I don't do a lot of phone communication. If I do, it's probably text message. So I encourage face-to-face interactions, which I think are vital for maintaining social cohesion. And in this increasing digital world, third spaces like Baldwin Company, they offer a space for real human connections and conversations and shared experiences. You gotta imagine, I have these ideas in the middle of COVID. You know, I'm thinking about building a hub for cultural exchange and learning that is completely dependent upon interpersonal communication. It's completely dependent upon people coming together and sharing space together. So I was petrified on how to execute this idea, but I knew that it was necessary for particularly Blacks in New Orleans to engage in this cultural exchange and how essential it was to fostering a mutual understanding of the issues that plague our community. So I think for me, the third space is just so important for civic engagement. And we need that civic engagement because that's what leads to activism. Yeah. It provides a venue for community meetings, discussions, and social issues, and the grassroots organizing and empowerment individuals that participate in this level of community gathering is what will go on to solve some of the world's biggest issues.
Gotcha. Yeah. And speaking of that, since this is the 100th anniversary birthday celebration of James Baldwin, his birthday is August 2nd. What ways has Baldwin, or I guess how I should say, how has Baldwin's work influenced your life and like the vision for Baldwin and Company?
You know, just Baldwin's work, it's profoundly influenced like my personal life and my vision for what Baldwin and Company could be. You know, what I hope for it to be. Part of that has just been the emphasis on social justice and equality. You know, James Baldwin is known for his powerful commentary on race, on identity, and social justice. And that has inspired me to create this space that promotes inclusivity and societal inequities, and just drive Baldwin and Company's commitment to providing like a platform for diverse authors and stories that challenge the status quo. I think if you follow us, then I have no problem challenging the status quo, and I'm always an advocate for social justice and equality. One of the other things that it has influenced me is just encouraging critical thinking and dialogue, which is probably the number one. Is I like to engage in critical thinking and dialogue. So much to the point to where people be like, "Man, you're argumentative." I was like, "No, I'm not. I don't mean to be argumentative, but I just want to challenge your ideas. I just want to challenge your thoughts, and I want you to challenge them." So Baldwin's essays and his novels, they're known for deep intellectual engagement and thought-provoking narratives. So this has helped influence Baldwin and Company to be not just a regular bookstore, but a community hub where critical thinking and meaningful dialogue are encouraged. So one of the things that we do is we aim to have discussions that provide thought and inspire action, much like James Baldwin work. We just had an event with Nicole Hannah-Jones and Dr. Daniel Black on Saturday, and then we had another one with Jarvis DeBerry and Michael Harriot. Both of those events, man, if you didn't leave away from those events encouraged to be a critical thinker and engage in dialogue, then I don't know what will encourage you to engage in those two activities. But it was so profound, like the discussions that these brilliant minds are having. And for me, it's important to bring those types of dialogues and inspire critical thought to our community and just celebrate Black excellence. So that was the other thing that James Baldwin did that I wanted to make sure that we do here in this space, is celebrate Black culture and the exploration of Black experience that we contributed to society, and it aligns with my vision. I feel like it aligns with Baldwin's vision, and it just a beacon for Black literature and culture. 80% of the books on our shelves are written by BIPOC authors, so we support and we uplift Black voices in the literary world. So those are some of the things that I take from Baldwin's mission in his work and try to incorporate here at Baldwin Company.
Specifically about Dr. Black, I got to sit in some of his classes because one of my cousins was I was one of his mentors. So just, I already know that conversation was insane. What were just some takeaways you had from it? Or like what kind of popped out just for us that didn't even get a chance to sit down and hear it?
Man, it was powerful. He asked Nicole questions she's never been asked before. And I think that's one of the things that I can appreciate. She's been interviewed hundreds of times, and some of the questions that he asked, I've never heard her ask. And I think and it reminds me of a Baldwin quote on I should say where the discussion went. Quote, forgive me if I get the quote wrong, but I think he said it is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. And I think the conversation helped reveal what we're up against as a society in this current time. What we as Black people, what the challenge in the moment currently is in this political, social, economic, present day, and how important it is for us to become knowledgeable and active.
Yeah, that's good, because I was gonna ask that too, like what Baldwin book or I guess even essay or anything, what like in this moment that you see the world in, what one do you say like, okay, this is one someone should read in this current time? I think it speaks to you the most.
Should I say all of them? But probably Nothing Personal. I think Nothing Personal is really good to speak into the moment of where we are. It's a little bit prophetic, and in this moment in time where we are. So I would recommend Nothing Personal. It's a really, really short essay. It's a book.
Yeah, what was like the first book you read by Baldwin? And which one kind of, all right, well, yeah, what was the first one that you remember reading?
Probably was Notes of Native Son. So I was a huge Richard Wright fan, and I actually liked Native Son. So I want to say it stood out to me of his critique of it. And I was like, oh man. I was like, I like hearing both sides of an argument. I was like, I didn't think about it. So he opened up my mind to a different way of thinking, from a, looking at our literature and society from a different lens and seeing some of, the negative stereotypes that the protagonist portrayed in Native Son. So I was like, oh, and I think I was like, well, let me read more of his work. And I think I read The Fire Next Time after that.
Oh yeah.
And at this time, I'm swallowing books. I'm probably reading. Whew, I don't know, man. At the time, during this time, I was probably reading, man, close to 10, 10 books a month. So I was just swallowing literature.
Yeah, I wish we had more of that now where it's just those we get the best of the best writers having critiques on it and they do like a whole book on it, right? So it's like I just think we could use that more and just instead of in society now where we just if someone says it, we just take it for face value or we don't push back on it enough. I enjoy that, like we're kind of talking about that, even if it's not always about sparring, but sometimes just bringing a different perspective or something that you might have missed and position it in a different way for people to still get what you're saying, but also see where you have fallen in some of the information that you're providing.
Why don't you think we do that today? Like our literary artists within our community, because there've always been some critiques of other literary artists within the Harlem Renaissance, but you don't necessarily see it today. And why do you think that is? And do you because I'm referring to your reference that you feel like there's room for it today.
Yeah, there is room for it. And if you think about it, to the ability to put out information has actually become easier than it's ever been, right? Because you have the ability to self-publish, even if it's not under a traditional publisher. And you have the ability to go to social media and write a very long, or even a Substack, or you can post it on Bookum for all I care. I don't know why. I think maybe it's just people have become a sense of I might as well do my own thing and I don't really care to have and maybe it's also maybe the expanding of views where people don't always think in terms of just their I don't know, lack of term, like maybe just the group they find themselves in, right? So whether it's I don't know. I really don't have a great answer for why it doesn't happen. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Like maybe it's just the fact that people are maybe more afraid to talk up on people's issues because of things like cancel culture and things like that, and they don't want to mess up somebody's money just because they think I don't. I think there's a lot of things that maybe are getting in the ways of those intellectual sparring matches that used to happen all the time back in the day, where you had a Malcolm X and Martin Luther King challenging each other, or James Baldwin challenging Malcolm X, or vice versa. I think there was a lot of that back in the day, and you had it across all different races too. That people would challenge each other, whether it's in music and all that. So I really don't have a great answer for it, but I think there's just barriers of either it's easier to get information out there, so therefore people forget about this, it's not as relevant, or like I said, maybe it's just more of a fearfulness to attack those bigger ideas. What do you think?
But I don't know, but Edgar Jr. he says that we're at a moment in society where we don't know how to disagree without being disagreeable. I think that has something to do with it. Is that there's been such a lack for intellectual discourse that we've lost our North Star on how to disagree without being disagreeable. And I think it's always been precarious for Blacks to be able to do that. We have to walk a fine line because you have this opposition forces that will draw a wedge in between us. And I think we're at a moment where individuals are somewhat sensitive to the criticisms that we get because it's so massive. Like for instance, You know, there's a lot of people at the time, they may not have even known Langston Hughes and Zora Hurston was beefing, you know. But today, you if you have two Black prominent figures and they have a mild disagreement, it is all over social media. Everyone has an opinion. So I think that the volume of attacks and opinions and outside opinions is what brings hesitation to the critique.
Yeah, and you know, being on the AUC campus in Atlanta, Morehouse, Clark, Atlanta, Spelman, Morris Brown, that used to happen all the time. You'd always have intellectual sparring battles about anything. It could have been sports, it could have been, and we used to do it all the time. Like you know, like even W. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington, and those very different mentalities that happened all the time. But I think, as you said, to a lot of your point, it is that feeling of they don't have to disagree without, yeah, like you said, without being disagreeable. I think that is kind of sums it up in a very simple way of why people don't challenge as much as it could be.
I think one of the last memorable ones, and you chime in here. What was one of the last memorable critiques within our literary community? Do you have one in my mind, but I just want to see if it's the one that you're thinking about?
I don't know which one you got. Let me see if
I'm thinking about Cornel West and Ta-Nehisi Coates.
okay. Because
No,
and I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say Cornel West and Michael Eric Dyson, they get into it a lot too.
yep, so um, I want to say Cornell. So yeah, but I enjoy it. Like I enjoy reading the perspectives. You know, like right now, I'm reading James Baldwin's review, Volume 8, and it's just a review from a number of different scholars who reviewed his work, and they're just giving their opinion on it. Some critical and some celebratory.
I do want to also get into like kind of how you started the bookstore and what was the process of like I know you're into real estate, so like how did all this get into starting the bookstore?
Hard. Very, 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 very difficult, my friend. Man, if you ever meet a bookseller, just know that they love literature. I gotta say that. Like, it's not an easy industry. Every bookstore owner, especially Black bookstore owner, if they're in the business, give them a hug because you just got to know they're in it for the love of literature and amplifying the voices of our community. That's the number one reason you stay in the business. It may not be why you got in the business, but it's the number one reason why you stay in the business. It is a very, very difficult grind. I remember my book rep for one of the publishers opening up Baldwin and Company, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Absolutely zero. I have no retail experience. I've never worked in a bookstore. Never worked in retail before. I had no idea where you get books, what they sell for, how to sell them. Didn't know what ISBNs were. I had no idea. So at this time, we've built a nice, comfortable relationship. She knows my background. She knows I worked in corporate America the last 20 years. She knows how successful I was. Understand why I relocated back to New Orleans to take care of my mother, but I had a really good real estate portfolio. So she was like, DJ, are you sure you want to do this? It's like, yeah, I read 10 hours a day. Well, I love reading. Why wouldn't I want to do this? It's my favorite pastime. Because in my mind, I just was going to be able to sit on a sofa with a book in my hand and talk to individuals like yourself about some of my favorite books. That's in my mind. So she was like, DJ, I just got to tell you. She said, you're about to do the most amount of work you've ever done in your life for the least amount of money you'll probably ever earn. not an exaggeration. So, so my friend, when I tell you it's difficult, it's a very, very, very difficult industry. And I know there's three varies, but that is not an exaggeration.
How'd you get some of those early customers and people visiting the store? How'd that kind of work?
I honestly can't necessarily speak to it. I got to be honest with you. I can't put my finger on what it was. I think for me, the idea was I'm creating a space where I want it to be. I'm creating a space that I think can help bring hope to a community. I was walking around, the bookstore's in my old neighborhood. So I'm walking around my old neighborhood and I'm talking to kids just doing mischievous things in the community. So I'm asking them why they're doing this, why aren't they in school, why are they misbehaving? And I'm talking to the kids and I was like, look, man, I've been you. I understand your circumstances. I understand your situation. I understand what it's like to go up here, but things can change. And for me, that's where I really started falling in love with the idea of creating this bookstore. So in the development of the idea and the development of the infrastructure and the look and feel and the identity of it, you know, part of me, I say, well, nothing, you know, it reminds me of James Baldwin quote. He said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So for me, I knew I wanted to change this community. I knew I wanted to contribute toward a better community and inspire ongoing efforts to address social injustice and promote critical dialogue. And I honestly think just in creating that space, for me, I honestly wasn't thinking about anyone else. I didn't think about, oh, people might like this, people might like that, or I should do this because that'll draw in people. Oh, I know if I did this, then I'll get a huge crowd. Kyle, I have to be honest with you, that was never my thought. My entire thought was, I'm going to build a space that I want to be in, that I think I would enjoy, and the people who enjoy this same thing, they will be attracted to it and they will come. And I was hopeful that some of the kids and the young Black kids in the community and others inside the community would gravitate toward it. I was not sure. I was as surprised as anyone else when February 20th, we opened our doors and there was a line 3 blocks long at 7 a.m. in the morning to get in Baldwin Company. And for the entire week, the line was down the block to enter into Baldwin Company. And I was just as surprised and blown away as anyone else. It was the epitome of, if you build it, they would come. Because I had been told by friends, family, so many other individuals that it was a bad idea on multiple fronts. I was told it's a bad idea, one, because I'm in New Orleans, which is one of the most illiterate cities in the country. So 84% of kids read below grade level. 84% of kids read below grade level. And I'm opening up a Black-owned bookstore in this community. Overall, Louisiana ranks in the bottom of literacy. We're not known as a literacy town, not known for education, just in general. On top of that, I'm opening up, if that's not bad enough, I'm opening up a coffee shop. It's a coffee shop bookstore. So you say, well, you know what? Maybe you lose on books. Maybe you won't have much success in books because it's such a low literacy rate inside of New Orleans. But at least the brother got coffee. And I remember telling my friend one time who came to visit, he said, D, you know they got a Starbucks across the street from you? I was like, yeah, I know. I've seen it. He was like, you gonna open up a coffee shop directly across the street from Starbucks? I was like, yeah. He said, so let me get this straight. You're gonna open up a bookstore in a city that nobody read. And you open up a coffee shop directly across the street from Starbucks. He's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Well, tell me this. What's plan B? I said, plan B. I said, I have a plan B. I said, trust me. I said, man, you know I don't go in anything without a plan B. I said, plan B is to make sure that plan A works, regardless of any circumstances. That's my plan B, is to make sure that under no uncertain terms will I fail at plan A. So so I didn't have a lot of encouragement coming into it. I got to be honest with you. There wasn't a lot of supportive evidence that said this was a good idea. And that's why there's a quote that I love. It says, the person with big dreams is more important than the person with all the facts. Because you can find every statistical data that would have said me opening up a Black-owned bookstore in New Orleans, in this community, was a horrible idea. Every statistical evidence you can look at would have said it was a poor idea. And I built it, and they came. And the city has just, the people from not just New Orleans, but especially the people from New Orleans, but the people from all around the world in the country, they have supported me overwhelmingly. So I say, if you build it, they will come. And I said again, the person with big dreams is more important than the person with all the facts.
DJ, I love that story and just the power of it. Because what we talk a lot about on this podcast is when we talk to founders, is that what's most personal is most general, right? And this company is, you wanted to see this in the world, so you went and did it. Or you want to see it in your community. You want it to be there. I think that's a lot of times when it comes to founders is like bringing what you believe is important to the world. And to your point is like, I don't need all the facts. I need to have the focus, the drive, the incentive, the ability to dream is the most important. And talk to me a little bit about, cuisine and art, like I said, art, because I see the art behind you. Is like, when did you get into art a little bit, or like, how do you move that into the Baldwin and Company to have it so it has that aesthetic feel to it?
So the art aspect, I've always been a lover of art. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. I got to be honest with you. I'm horrible at any form of art. If it wasn't for my younger brother, who's a fantastic artist, I probably would have failed art class because he did all my art homework. But I've always admired it. I've always admired his gift, even from when we were a kid. And he would draw this amazing, like we're like 5 years old at this point. So my brother, who was the artist, he's 11 months younger than me. 11 months to the day. I'm September 24th. He's August 24th. So we're the same age for a month. So so we're like 5, 6 years old. And when I tell you the kid is a phenomenal artist, he is an exceptional artist. So he'd draw this amazing image on the wall and say, and sign, DJ did this under it. Like, so I've always admired art, even from when, I was almost getting whippings for drawing on the wall, until my parents realized that I don't have artistic bone in my body. And the one who's actually drawing this on the walls is JJ and not DJ. So bringing in that love into the space, like I said, I created a space that I wanted to be in. In designing it, so much of it was another Baldwin quote. He said, "The place in which I'll fit in not exist until I make it." I had went to so many other bookstores and coffee shops in New Orleans, to whereas I didn't fit in it. So it's like Toni Morrison says, it's like, if you can't find the book that you want to read, then write it.
Yeah.
So for me, when I was designing the space, I love art. Don't have the talent, but I love individuals like Jacob Lawrence. So I knew that I had to have a collision of art and literature because I think they go hand in hand. I've always loved going to museums and just walking around and strolling the halls and admiring the craft. So yeah,
No.
that's how the artistic vision came about inside of Baldwin Company.
Yeah, it makes sense. And even with the curating a space, you also do the podcast studio too. Talk to me about how that plays into it, how the community uses it and receives it.
So the podcast studio was an idea that I had. I love podcasts. I'm a huge fan of listening to podcasts. And I recognize I used to give books for every holiday, every gift. If you got a gift from me, then it was always a book. And I used to hear from so many other individuals that they just don't like reading. They don't enjoy reading. They fall asleep when they're reading. So it became important for me to provide another platform for storytelling. And I recognize that some people are auditory learners. And recognizing that, I wanted to create a space for those artists, those individuals who are storytellers to come in and have a powerful medium for storytelling and allowing individuals to share their experiences and ideas and perspectives in their own voices. And that's how the podcast studio inside of Baldwin, the idea for the podcast studio came about. It was one, I love podcasts. Two, as I'm giving books to all my friends and family, telling them they should read it because it's a powerful narrative. And just like, I just don't receive my information like that. I prefer to receive my information auditorily.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? If I ever create a space, then I want to make sure that I'm giving those individuals with powerful voices a space to create. And I thought it would also foster great community engagement. It offers the community members an opportunity to come in and create their own content, which also fosters creativity and encourages local voices to just participate in meaningful conversations about culture, literature, and social issues. And that's what it's really what the mission of Baldwin Company is all about. Shang-Chi said, a flower doesn't worry about the flower next to it. It just grows. So we bloom. So, I mean, I don't worry about the flower next to me. Just bloom.
That's good.
I hope that the seeds that I plant, I don't worry about the harvest. I focus on planting the seed as perfectly as I can plant this seed every single day. And if I do that, then my harvest will grow.
Yep. I agree. Let's get into some readers' questions, and as we wrap up towards the end, let me know what you read last, what you're reading now, and what's next on your list.
So one of the most recent books that I just read, I absolutely love. It's called Hours, Ours, by Philip B. Williams. Absolutely loved it. Have you read it?
No, I've seen it, so I need to check it out. You're like the second person to say that, so I definitely need. Well, actually, a couple of people have now told me that book, so
it's really good. You should certainly check it out. One I just read. I also just read "We Are the Leaders We're Looking For" by Eddie Glaude Jr. I just finished up that one also. Oh, I just also finished up Black AF History.
Okay.
Harriet. He just came, so I just finished that. This is actually my second time reading it. That one I felt like required a second time to read it. It's a lot of historical facts, so I just finished rereading it and we just had them. What I'm currently reading right now is James Baldwin Review, Volume 8, just a review of his work by different literary scholars. Just reading that one. And then what's next is, what do I have next on my list to pick up? I feel bad saying this because I haven't read it yet, but James. Okay. I haven't read James yet. Have you read it?
That's another one that's on my list. I want to read that one too.
Yeah, I heard it's excellent. I have a really good friend who opinion I really respect, and I asked him, like, what did he give it out of 10? And he said like 9.5. I was like, oh.
Yeah, people are putting it on top list. So that's another one I definitely, because what I'm about to get into is heavy. So that's the next one I'm about to read. And then I'll go into, I like to switch them up because I'll read some entrepreneurship books, I'll read some fiction books, and then so. But yeah, those are moving up my list as well.
Yeah, man. So I gotta read James. So I'll probably pick that one up. Pick that one up soon. There's a lot of books that I also read. They're advanced reads. So like I get caught reading a lot of arcs. So sometimes it's difficult for me to read the books that have already been out because I'm reading so many arcs.
Yeah.
Uh,
How do you curate, like, I guess, I mean, how do you think about reading when it comes to, because I'm sure a lot of people, authors come to your store a lot, so you have to read their books. And how do you kind of carve out to make sure you're getting just the books you want to read, in spite of doing all this entrepreneur stuff and all that? Because I find myself, so it's kind of a question I'm asking even from, because I read a lot of stuff for business and I have a lot of books I need to read for personal. So how do you kind of balance all that?
Unfortunately, recently, I haven't been able to read as many business books. I used to read a lot of business books, but now reading is almost like a job for me, which does takes out a little bit of the fun because I have to read. You know, if you're coming to Baldwin Company, um, 9 out of 10 times I'll be in a read your book. So so I feel bad because we did have Percival and I didn't read this book. I just didn't have time. We had so many events coming up to it. I think I had like 4 books on my list because during that time we had, I think we were doing 2 events a week. And then I do a segment, I do like a monthly segment on the news where I recommend 4 books. So at any given month, man, I got 4 books that I got to read. And sometimes that's difficult. So the business books, I unfortunately I don't read as much. So right now there's not a balance between the two. Unfortunately, most of the time I'm reading literary fiction books because that's most of the books that we're selling. We have a small business section, and I actually don't get a lot of requests for author events. Not just authors coming in the shop, but just author events from the big 5 publishers.
Yeah.
For them doing book stops at Baldwin Company. Most of them are either nonfiction or literary fiction. So I need to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
What's some of your favorite business books?
I would say maybe it isn't a balance. So some of my favorite business books, I'll read a lot of biographies. So one was Who is Michael Vitz? He started CAA, so it's more about agency and film in that space. And then I read 12 Notes by Quincy Jones. I love that book. It's more in this form of like business advice or just like human advice. Um, so those would be some. Of course, I like 0 to 1, just as far as a startup book, and so a lot of different books in that space. But then, like I said, I'll mix it in. So I'll read some business books, which has mostly become just biographies at this point, and then I'll do like more historical fictions, and then that, and then also now I've been trying to read at least some fiction and some romance. So I read like Tia Williams' book. I love a song for Ricky Wilde. I want to read Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. So some of those more books that are kind of mainstream that I haven't got a chance to read, just to kind of have a grasp of everything that kind of comes around in the book space.
Yeah, I enjoyed Tomorrow. I thought it was a really good book.
Yeah, good. Let's get into some quick rapid fires and then we'll end it up. So can you share a book you've read lately that has challenged your worldview?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. Let me think about that. Unfortunately, I haven't read one, and this is bad on me. This is a fault. I've only really been reading books that reaffirms my beliefs and like my thoughts because all of them have just really been Black literature, Black ideology, Black culture. There's one book that I have that I'm getting ready to pick up though that will. Can't remember the name of it, but it's Thomas Sowell. Are you familiar with Thomas Sowell?
No, I'm not familiar.
So Thomas Sowell is a Black economist, and he makes the argument for class-based policies versus race-based policies,
Okay.
like legislation and laws. And I'm really interested to read his perspectives because I'm more on the side that I don't know if you can remove race from legislation and expect to have equality. But Thomas Sowell says that the reason why you do not have equality, the reason why so many laws have been unsuccessful in creating from the civil rights movement is because these things were created based on race and not class. But unfortunately, most of the books I've been reading have been books that we're getting in the shop and authors that have been coming. And I just, not to say that we don't start contrarian alternative ways of thinking outside of the Black mainstream media. I just haven't taken the time to read them. But I'm intrigued, and I like to challenge my ideas. I never want to become a prisoner to my thoughts. I think if I can't read something and my position isn't fortified, or if I can't argue it, then it's weak, and I need to strengthen it. So I'm always looking for ways to challenge it. I mean, it's just like muscles. So it's like, you go to the gym, Kyle, and you put your muscles, we put our physical body under stress because we understand that challenging those muscles, the strength of those muscles is what actually makes them stronger. Putting it under intense levels of pressure is what makes it stronger, but we don't carry that same ideology to our brain and to our way of thinking. So for me, I'm typically always looking for some form of alternative perspective on an idea that I have. But because I've just recently been reading more so for the books that we stock and for the authors that we're having, I can't say I have, man. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think I do it more with podcasts anyways, or like videos versus, I mean, I guess with books I do, like I said, I try to read in different genres because of that, because I know I can be like, okay, I'm going to get comfortable here. So I make sure to try to read different genres. But who's an author you engage with later in your life that you were surprised to have been like, yeah, this person, I should have read them a lot earlier?
Frederick Joseph.
No. Perfect.
I was like, man, this dude, he wrote Dear Black Friend, and he just came out with We Are Alive, Beloved, and he has a Substack, and shit, man, he come with it. I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with Frederick Joseph?
I definitely need to check them out. It sounds like, because you even said with the Substack too, so there's some work I need to definitely check.
He come with it. He come with it. I like him.
Perfect. And the way we end this podcast, it's a two-sided question, but you can answer it however you want. What would you like to see more of in the book world?
More prominent Black books, more prominent thought leaders, and just Black literature. So I'm a book buyer, so I'm constantly going through all these arcs. I'm going through all these books that are coming up for pub date, and I won't necessarily call out some of the publishers, but there are a serious lack of diversity in the books that are being published. Not just diversity in culture and ideology and thought, but also in race. So I mean, man, it is. I would love to see more diversity being published in the book world.
Okay. And then on the other side, what would you like to see less of in the book world?
You want my honest answer?
Why not?
Less mediocre white folks publishing books. I mean, just being honest with you. I mean, man, they got a lot of mediocre white authors publishing books, getting huge paydays. So amazing Black authors that are out here writing books, from just being honest with you. But, man, white mediocrity has always been celebrated, and Black excellence has never gotten its credit. So if you ask me what I want to see more Black authors get more tour dates, more publishing deals, bigger paydays, bigger advances, more of an opportunity to amplify their voice, and less of this white mediocrity.
Well, DJ, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Definitely congratulations on your store and everything that you all do in the community. Thank you again for coming on to our podcast and talking about James Baldwin as we celebrate his 100th birthday. Please let us know what's coming up in your world, anything that we can support, or where to find you on the internet.
Man, you can find us. Our website is www.baldwinandcobooks.com. Our Instagram is Baldwin and Company, and is spelled out A&D. Threads is Baldwin and Company as well. You can also find us on YouTube at Baldwin and Company. We have an amazing tiny bookstore concert coming up on August 2nd. If you're in New Orleans, please come through between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. It is going to be epic. We have an amazing band, and we're going to do spoken word, and we're going to celebrate James Baldwin's 100th birthday like no other. So please stay tuned. We have more amazing author talks, but the most prominent event that we have coming up is happening within the next few days. I'm super excited about it. August 2nd, Baldwin and Company, tiny bookstore concert. It's going to be epic.
All right, we'll make sure to put that all into the show notes. Again, DJ, it was a pleasure talking with you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, man. You too. Have a great one.